you got to get it right. The bottom line, you got to get it right. There was more than one penalty on that play. I mean, to me, when you break it down, it's the worst no call in NFL history.
The Cajun Cannon, Bobby Hebert, former Saints quarterback, now radio host for the New Orleans Saints, weighing in on the Dan Patrick Show on the hubbub in the football world, the big non-call, the New Orleans Saints against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. We'll get to that and much more on the Bucs and our 3 and Out segment. This is A Few Extra Bucs on pewterpirates.com. I'm Mike Neighbors. We're going to bring in our esteemed producer, Justin Thomas, and our Buccaneer insider, Roy Cummings, in just a bit. But off the top, I want to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. House of Brews in Lutz on the corner of North Del Mabry and Van Dyke. Sea Dog Brewing Company, 2 great locations on the beach, Treasure Island, and in Clearwater. Great brews, great food, great service. Justin Thomas, you know what? We always like to talk on these podcasts that we don't have a big pre-show meeting because we like to keep it really kind of real and raw with our listeners. But what'd you think of the non-call?
I mean, it was obviously a huge non-call. I don't know if it's the biggest non-call in NFL history, but it definitely is in the second biggest game, I guess you could say, outside of the Super Bowl. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if this leads to any changes.
Yeah, I think there have been definitely worse calls in sports, especially in other sports. But in terms of the game of football in the NFL, you could debate. I know we're all prisoner of the moment and everything, but you could debate if this was the worst ever. I'll bring in Roy. Roy, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this. I want to preface my feelings by first saying I hate people who make excuses about calls. That's always been a pet peeve of mine because every team gets bad calls in football games. But I thought in this one, though, you know, people could say, well, the Saints won the toss in overtime and Drew Brees threw an interception. It never should have gotten to that point. And I know the Saints should have scored more in the red zone early on. But at that juncture of the game was so much on the line. I know you had Des Bryant's no catch a few years ago. I thought this was just unbelievable in so many ways, Roy.
Yeah, I have a hard time. I can't think of a more egregious error by an official in a game than this. There have been a lot of bad calls. It seems every year, right around playoff time, whether it's the championship game or the division round or the Super Bowl itself, there is a call that ends up becoming the narrative for a week or two around the NFL. And it's usually a mistake. And this obviously ranks right up there with the most. Again, to me, it's the most egregious mistake that an official has made in the playoffs. Because a lot of times these things get corrected. A lot of times it's a judgment call. There was no judgment here. It was blatant. And the thing that I'm curious about is, what was the official actually thinking? Some of the videos taken from the stands show that there was an official looking right at it, no more than 5, 6, 7, 10 yards away at the most. Yeah. And, you could have called any number of penalties there. It's pass interference. It was unnecessary roughness. It was a helmet-to-helmet hit. The player admits it was pass interference. Everybody knows it was pass interference except apparently the official. Why it wasn't corrected on the field, I don't know. It's egregious. Is that the reason the Saints lost? Certainly you can make that argument. I'll stand on the side of, you got to go play defense. You had a 3-point lead, and a few other issues I think led to their loss. But look, there's no question. This is right up there. It's as bad a mistake as an official has made. And it's another black eye on the NFL. Every year they seem to have a problem. And going into some of their biggest games, the narrative is about officiating and not the play on the field, the actual play on the field. And I think it's bad for the league.
Now, this is a Bucs podcast, but we like to cover the hot topics of the NFL. And as we've mentioned in previous podcasts, we're going to be with you the entire offseason. We're not just shutting it down after the regular season. We're a year-round podcast. And we're going to touch on the Senior Bowl coming up. We're going to touch on the Bucs trip to London, an NFC South game, by the way, and also an exit to their coaching staff of a guy who was kind of an electric guy on the staff a year ago. But I want to throw this at you, Roy, because we are a Bucs podcast. You covered the Bert Emanuel game, the 1999 NFC Championship game. How would you compare, what happened with Bert Emanuel's kind of, non-catch there to this call?
Well, the Bert Emanuel mistake or call was obviously the kind of the tip of the iceberg of a bigger problem that I don't think the NFL has got right yet. The closest it came was a year ago. So you're talking almost 20 years now before the NFL got it right in terms of what is a catch. That Bert Emanuel call sparked the entire debate over what is and what is not a catch in the NFL. To me, one of the silliest debates ever brought up in sports. How can we not know what a catch is? We know what a catch is in baseball. I think how can you not know what a catch is in football? And yet the NFL continues to struggle to really figure that out. But again, that was an interpretation of a rule that was poorly worded. This is a blatant, they're ignoring of what the actual rule is in states, and that's a mistake. So the mistake here is not that there's a misinterpretation of the rule, but a misinterpretation of what needs to be called. So this was blatant. I mean, again, as I said before, everything about the play says it's pass interference.
What's amazing is my youngest daughter is a marginal sports fan at best, and she got home from school today, and obviously she goes to school in Tampa, and she goes to middle school, and she said, "Daddy, everybody's talking about that Saints game and that terrible call. Can they fire those officials?" I mean, to me, there are people who were touched by this play, Roy, who have no dog in the fight. You have people in Cincinnati or Minnesota or Arizona. That shows how bad the call is to me. And, I was at the game and I covered the game, and being in the Superdome and hearing how loud it was early in the game. And after that, it was a helpless feeling in that Superdome. Fans were angry, and it's, I can't imagine being the officials on the field, because you know how it is when they break it down. One official usually watches a different receiver. And how do you watch that receiver and you're right in front of him, you got the side judge, and you miss that call? I asked Drew Brees about the play afterwards. You had an opportunity late, and your head coach Sean Payton said the pass interference call on Tommy Lee Lewis was a call he'll never forget, one of the most obvious pass interference calls he's ever seen. What was your take on that call, and how tough was that?
Well, so I didn't really see it. I said live, so to speak. I'm throwing the ball to Tommy Lee to kind of a spot, and the defender makes his way over there and obviously hits him well before the ball gets there. And I think we all felt like it was very, very obvious. And yet, man, for that to be missed in that situation is painful. It's very painful. The acknowledgement of it by the league, it doesn't make it any better.
Yeah, I'd like to have heard the phone call between Sean Payton and the NFL. Maybe one day we'll get the tape after the game, but I'm sure that was maybe entertaining, to say the least. But Roy, let me ask you this, and this is probably preposterous a little bit. Maybe I should have saved this for our 3 and out. But what's worse, the Bucs season walking away, or the Saints season? I know you have an NFC South title. I know you're number 1 top seed, but the Bucs and the Saints fan base right now. The Bucs have had a few weeks to kind of get excited about Bruce Arians. Now the Saints fan base, who looked so much better than the Bucs fan base a few weeks ago, they're wondering, maybe we only have 1 year left of the Peyton Brees era. It's funny how things can change so quickly with one call and maybe one game in the NFL.
Yeah, it really is. Look, it's tougher to be the Saints. You were on the cusp of going to the Super Bowl, and again, I think you're good enough to win it. I think they were the best team in the NFC throughout the course of the year. Yeah, they faded down the stretch a little bit. I think that showed up in this game as well. It certainly showed up in the last minute and a half of the game in regulation and overtime, and obviously, or even early on when they only put up 13 points when they had a chance to put up 21. But at the end of the day, they aren't going to the Super Bowl because, in part, because of a bad call, a missed call by an official. The Bucs didn't get to the playoffs because they just weren't good enough. So it's much tougher to be a Saints fan right now than it is to be a Bucs fan. The Bucs didn't even earn an opportunity to be in the conversation about the Super Bowl or even the playoffs, much less. So, whereas the Saints, they're in that conversation. I think a lot of people had them as Super Bowl favorites, and they got that opportunity robbed. So it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, would you rather get blown out or would you rather lose a game like that? And often it's much easier to get blown out because the emotions aren't so crazy afterwards. Though we're going to let go of this no call thing, but to me the most damning part of this is the guy who made the play, Rams corner nickel, or Nick Roby-Coleman, who's actually from nearby Frostproof, Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. This is what he had to say. You know, he's not really holding back here about his innocence in the call at all.
Darrell got up, you know, when I got up, he said incomplete. So, you know, I just was like, thank you. Like,
yeah, that kind of says it all, Roy. You know, they replayed the Pine Tar game with George Brett. What if the NFL just replayed the last 4 minutes? That would obviously never happen. But, there is some precedence, right? You had the Pine Tar game.
Yeah, but again, that's an interpretation of the rule. I mean, you look at that one and, George Brett's bat, the Pine Tar was well above the label. The rule says it can't be. He hit the home run. To me, hey, that's great timing on the part. It was great timing on the part of the Yankees. They were waiting for a significant moment to call that, and if they said to themselves, if that moment occurs, we're gonna call it. Same thing happened in the first Stanley Cup Finals that I ever covered, the 1993 Finals. The Los Angeles Kings of Wayne Gretzky and the Montreal Canadiens, then coached by Jacques Demers. The Canadiens noticed that Marty McSorley's stick was an illegal stick, and when he scored a goal in overtime to seemingly give him an edge, they challenged it. It ended up being a penalty. Kings end up scoring, or the Canadiens end up scoring on the ensuing power play. And that was that. I think I actually wrote one of my greatest leads ever off of that game. I wrote something along the lines of, the Stanley Cup Finals is a measure of a player's integrity, a measure of his, skill, toughness, etc. It's also a measure of his integrity. And in game one of the Stanley Cup Finals, Marty McSorley's didn't measure up. Neither did his stick.
Oh, wow! I like that. That's in the Cummings top 5, I believe.
Yeah, it was in my top 5, I think.
Yes.
On deadline, by the way.
Wow. See, that's how you roll, man.
That's how I roll.
We have you on here. All right, let's get away from that. But I think that's kind of the hubbub in the NFL right now. And I will say one more thing though. To fix this, to me, last point on this, I think they have to do two things, Roy. We're baseball guys. Why can Major League Baseball have the mothership in New York monitor every call? Every time there's a replay, they check in with the mothership. The NFL needs that, especially when they have 2 frigging games. That's all they got to worry about. And also, let them challenge the pass interference. It's time for that. If they're going to make it a pass-happy league, you got to have a challenge for pass interference.
Totally agree. Absolutely agree 100%. Look, I'm in favor of seeing everything challengeable and leave it up to the coaches. I wouldn't change the rules in terms of how many challenges they get, but I would make everything challengeable. If you want to challenge a holding call, go ahead, challenge. You want to call challenge an offsides call. Because you know what? Let's go to the AFC game, and I think the Chiefs could have easily challenged a roughing the passer call that hurt them and won that argument. So there's a lot of arguments to be won. I'm 100% in favor of seeing the challenges expanded, not the number, but what is reviewable and what can be challenged.
You have the technology, use it, NFL. And Roger Goodell, I'm not sure if you have a pulse, but the game was Sunday, and we're a few days away. It'd be nice to hear from you. There's lawsuits in New Orleans. They're talking about having a parade, which is all kind of nonsense to me. But it'd be good to hear from Roger Goodell. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a bad look all around.
It's unfortunate. He's not going to talk until the Friday before the Super Bowl at the annual, his annual State of the League address. And to me, look, unfortunately, what's going to happen here is we're going to have a good solid week, maybe plus, of talk about this issue. And then it's going to die down a little bit because we'll go into the Super Bowl and everybody will be talking about that. And then all of a sudden it's going to come back up on that Friday because somebody Likely Mike Triplett or one of the guys from New Orleans. Could be you, Mike Neighbors. Is going to go there. It could be you, Justin, and he's going to say, Roger, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a big victim guy, not a big blame the refs call, but from Bountygate to NFL didn't have anything to do with the Minnesota Miracle, but between Bountygate, the Minnesota Miracle, and this, that Peyton Breeze era, I don't care even if they win a Super Bowl next year, it'll be the what if era because there were so many what ifs. What if Sean Payton hadn't been suspended? What if they hadn't had the Minnesota Miracle? And what if they would have gotten that call against the Rams? So who knows?
Yeah, right.
Let's move on to the Senior Bowl, something you and I, especially you, covered for years and years and years. And, you can count so many success stories in the Buccaneer draft. I think one recently that kind of sticks out, Ali Marpet is a big success story from the Senior Bowl. What do you make of this week, and how much can the coaches get out of this?
You can get a lot. It's your first opportunity really to get a hands-on look, an up-close look at the players. And it's only the seniors. It's not the juniors. And usually you're talking, a lot of juniors are going to be in the first 2-3 rounds of the draft. If they're not, they probably shouldn't come out. But, it's a big week. A lot of decisions are made here regarding players throughout the draft, not just first-round picks, but second-round picks, third-round picks. It's a great opportunity to get to know players, learn a little bit more about them. You can have an opportunity to talk to them. It's a very open situation. It's interesting after practice. I mean, the players are usually descended upon by scouts and sometimes coaches and general managers themselves, and they have meetings set up for throughout the week in Mobile. And it's like an NFL convention there, guys. And everybody's represented, and they get this firsthand look at the players. And it's all about the practices. It's interesting. Coaches and GMs don't much care about the game. They'll see that on tape if they want to look at it. But they're more interested in watching how these kids practice. That's where they end up seeing the real raw talent and where the skills really lie, because these guys are run through drills that, in essence, are designed to show you exactly what kind of skill set they have in terms, as a cornerback, can he sink his hips? Can he turn his body quickly? He's got the quick twitch you're looking for. With offensive linemen, how quick is his explosion off the line? How good is his punch? How low does he get? Does he get leverage in terms of pad level, that kind of thing? So it's a real technical, kind of school. It's very interesting.
That was better than Mel Kiper right there. That was some solid lingo. Love it. I'm jacked for the draft now, man. I can't wait.
And I don't have a helmet for hair, so
You know what, Roy? I mentioned Ali Marpet. I mean, you covered the Senior Bowl for years, and I'm thinking about, sometimes you forget how old you are. I remember covering LaDainian Tomlinson at the Senior Bowl. I remember it's a great place to do live shots for television. You set up and do live shots there, and you just get all kinds of guests, coaches. I mean, it's a mecca of that's how it used to be anyway. I know it's changed a little bit, but what is there a story of a Bucs draft pick that you remember? Anything that stick out at all from the Senior Bowl over the years?
Yeah, actually, there've been a few that you look at, and you see the guys. The Bucs for a long time, for a while they coached in this game, and that's where the real advantage is. I've always been surprised at teams that passed on the opportunity to coach at these games. It's happened a lot.
Yeah.
But when the Bucs had the opportunity, they embraced it because it's such an opportunity to really get to know guys and to figure out what they're about. And it's usually when teams coach a guy that they get a chance to steal a guy. Sean King was a perfect example of a guy who the Buccaneers, Tony Dungy and his crew, coached that Senior Bowl, and Sean King was on their team, and it was through that experience that they decided we're going to draft this kid. We want Sean King to be part of our football team. It's happened with several players in their history. They've done that where they go to the Senior Bowl and either coach them or they just lock in on a guy and say that guy right there was at the Senior Bowl. Donovan's Ali Marpet is a very good recent example of a guy who the Bucs went to the Senior Bowl, had an idea, thought they knew about him, they'd never seen him, But with each passing day, they said, that's our guy. We're going to find a way to get that guy.
Interesting. Well, we're going to dive into the draft at length in the coming weeks and months. But, looking at this draft right now, Roy, it's a different draft setup than a year ago because it was such a quarterback-heavy draft a year ago. But now it's almost consensus that the Arizona Cardinals are going to select Nick Bosa, the defensive end out of Ohio State, who was injured this year and probably wisely sat out and healed himself up. And then you have the Niners. They're not going to get a quarterback. The Jets aren't going to get a quarterback. Raiders aren't going to get a quarterback, and well. Then you have the Bucs at number 5. Now, I think a couple interesting things could happen if you're Jason Light. Dwayne Haskins, of course, and there are some other big quarterbacks that teams may move up for. You wonder if Jason Light may trade down from that number 5 if there's a team like the Jaguars who want to trade up and get a quarterback early.
Yeah, I think they're going to be in position to make a move if they want to. Jason Light obviously has proven he is not afraid to move down in the draft. He's done it the last couple of years. He's done it several times. He's a fan of it. He likes to pick up an extra pick or two, second or third round. Hasn't always worked out in terms of either who he picked or the pick that he ends up getting. So maybe he'll think of it a little bit differently this year and just say, you know what, I got a top 5 pick. We're a team that could use one of those top 5 talents. So they may just stick to their guns this year and stay put. But certainly there's going to be an opportunity there, I think, for them to, because what happens is quarterbacks always get elevated for some, I guess the reason is that, it's a quarterback driven league. So there's always, some team that's going to overpay for quarterbacks. And that's exactly what will happen this year, too. Dwayne Haskins is probably the guy that everybody will overpay for. There may actually be another one or two that get up into that mix at some point. We'll see. But
Drew Lock.
Could be Daniel Jones at Duke or Drew Lock. Yeah, take your pick. But they'll get elevated for some strange reason. And so the Bucs may have an opportunity to do something. The other thing that could happen, if the Bucs are clear that they're going to take, who knows, that they want maybe an edge rusher, a guy like maybe Josh Allen or Rashawn Gary or somebody like that. And somebody else is afraid that they're going to lose out on Josh Jacobs, the running back. They would move down a spot or two, to give somebody that opportunity, as long as the players that they're looking at, maybe they've got 2 guys rated just as highly or whatever. They feel like, look, I'll move down 2 spots because either way, I'm still going to get, one of the 2 guys that I really like here. I've got them both ranked at the same spot. So this is when all that stuff kind of starts to happen. And by the time everybody gets to the combine, this is when the work gets done now. By the time everybody gets to the combine, usually the draft board is set. And really, by the time you get there, it's really you're just confirming what your scouts have already, the information your scouts have already given you.
A guy that I see on a lot of mock drafts for the Bucs at number 5, I think if they trade down would still be there, maybe a few picks later, is Greedy Williams, a cornerback from LSU. Now, he's not at the Senior Bowl. He came out early. Really athletic kid, maybe not the most polished cornerback so far, but I'm seeing Greedy Williams' name a lot in these mock drafts.
Yeah, you are. You're going to see his name a lot, and you're going to see a lot of names. Look, fans have a tendency to overrate players as well. They'll look at guys and say that, the Bucs need to go get him because they need a cornerback, and Greedy Williams will be, one of the first guys that they look at, or maybe a Byron Murphy or somebody like that. But you got to be careful. Look, the scouts pretty much know what they're doing. You don't want to overpay for somebody, and right now, depending on whose draft board you're looking at or whose rankings you're looking at, Greedy Williams is either a top 5 player or he's a possibly early second round player. It depends. And so that's what this process right now, it's too soon. This is why mock drafts in February and actually mock drafts in a good chunk of March are really a waste of your time. Because you just don't know where every team sits and how they've ranked players yet. That work is still going on. Greedy Williams is a heck of a football player. There's no doubt about it. Some scouts believe he's got all pro skills, possibly the best press coverage corner in the draft. But is he a first-round pick? Probably. Is he a top 5? Not right now, according to most legitimate scouts. Again, you can't overrate what it is you think you need, and then go chasing guys just because you think they fit what you need. You can't do that. You got to let the draft come to you a little bit.
Yeah, to me, when you look at this draft, Roy, at number 5, if they stay there, is there one position they really got to key in on, or are you a big fan of the best player available?
Well, in this case, with the way I look at the Buccaneers, I think they're a team that is close to being a playoff caliber team. I think they've got to fill a couple of holes. Cornerback is one of them. Okay, that's one. I think defensive line is another. A lot's going to depend on whether they decide to be a base 3-4 or 4-3 team, or if they're just going to run a multiple of those kind of schemes as a one gap team. And the other thing, obviously, they're going to have to get a tackle to replace DeMar Dotson. This is the draft, I think, where you have to do that. Well, then you have to decide, when do you do that? Is it the first round? I think at number 5, the way the Buccaneers probably should just take the best player available, because it's more than likely going to be a defensive lineman. Okay? It could be a running back. I wouldn't spend money on one there. It could be an offensive tackle, but the likelihood of it being the offensive tackle the Bucs want is a little shaky. You're probably the best offensive tackle in the draft right now is a right tackle, and so is that really what you want? Jawan Taylor, he's more of a right tackle, and a lot of people think he's going to be a guard in the NFL. So again, this is a situation where he's a University of Florida player. A lot of people in Tampa will overrate him because he's a Gator. They'll think he's a better player than he is. He's probably not a top 5 pick, and he's probably a right tackle at best. If he's a tackle, he's probably a right guard in the NFL. So for people to suggest he's the pick, that might be a bit of a stretch. So again, let the draft come to you. If you're picking between 2 or 3 defensive ends, and you feel like you're in pretty good shape at the defensive end position, don't worry about it. You know what? Jason Pierre-Paul's not going to play forever either.
Right. Can you give me a name from this week's Senior Bowl? I know you always do your homework with this stuff. That could be a possibility for the Bucs, or are we way too early? Because I know we'll probably do Cummings mock draft 8.0 by the time we reach April. But is there a guy that kind of intrigues you at the Senior Bowl this week?
Well, there is a guy who I like out of Kentucky, Josh Allen. He's an edge rusher. He's a top 5 player, virtually no matter who you talk to at this point anyway. He is a top 5 talent. How it all shakes out between now and draft day is a little bit different. We'll see where he's at. But to me, he fits everything that they're looking for. He's an impact player right away. I like what he does in terms of getting off him. He's got great quickness. He's kind of a tall, lanky guy. I mean, he looks the part. And that's something else that teams do. They'll go there. They'll have their chart. They'll say, look, I want my edge rushers to be 6'5" at least, 290 pounds, no more. I want them to, have this kind of quickness. They got to do this in the cone drill. They got to do this in certain drills. And if they meet those measurements, they stay right where they're at in terms of their draft grade. And he's a guy I'd be looking at. But again, if you're talking about, trading down a little bit, Andre Dillard. Now there's an offensive tackle who could probably play a little bit on the left side. If you're not a fan of Donovan Smith, this is, again, we're talking about guys who are at the Senior Bowl. Andre Dillard, offensive tackle out of Washington State. He can play left tackle. He's got all the skills for it. Would give you an opportunity to move a guy like Donovan Smith to right tackle, which might be his better spot. So that's another guy I'm looking at the Senior Bowl this week. So there's 2 names right there that I think everybody should look at. Another guy, Montez Sweat, edge rusher out of Mississippi State. Skilled player, but my guess is he's not going to be in the range where the Buccaneers are going to be picking. If they trade way down, that's a guy they could look at. Montez Sweat, Mississippi State defensive end.
This seems to be a draft, and I know all the drafts are different, where I don't know how deep it is, but it seems like the more picks they get, because they have a lot of needs, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Boy, if they could get a good deal, if somebody's quarterback thirsty and they could trade with them, it seems like the kind of draft where they could really capitalize on that.
Well, they can. And, what I said before about guys like Greedy Williams, just because he doesn't – and let's just say for the sake of the argument, the Greedy Williams never jumps up into the top 5 the way some people think he's going to jump into the top 5. Let's say that he ends up ranked, 15th, okay? That's where it makes sense for the Buccaneers to possibly move out of the top 5. If they think that everything else in the top 5 or 10 doesn't really help them as much, and they're targeting a guy like Greedy Williams or Nasir Adderley, a safety out of Delaware. If they're looking at guys like that, that's where it makes sense for you to move down, take someone else's first-round pick, add a third-round pick, try to combine that, because now maybe you can double up on cornerbacks early on. Maybe get 2 before you even get to your second-round pick. That could happen, and that makes a lot of sense. So just because a guy like, say, Greedy Williams, again, doesn't fit into the top 5, doesn't mean he's not a target for the Buccaneers. He could be, because that's where the trade down really benefits you if that's who you're targeting. If you think, you know what, we've got to come away from this draft with 2 impact cornerbacks, they have a way to do it. They've got the ammunition at number 5.
All right, let's get into a couple hot topics. The news on Tuesday. Brinson Buckner, boy, he came in with a lot of energy on Dirk Cutter's staff, but he's now on Chucky's staff. The Raiders hired Brinson Buckner as their new defensive line coach. There was some thought that Bruce Arians was going to keep him. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that he wasn't kept. And largely because I don't think he's that good of a coach. He was a heck of a player, but I didn't see him do anything with the Bucs defensive linemen this year that stood out to me. I mean, the Bucs had a few more sacks, but I think that just came courtesy of their raw talent. I didn't see him do anything special with anybody on the line. Vita Vea became a nice player once he got healthy and got in shape. GERALD McCOY, I think, took a little bit of a step backwards. It might have just been a natural step backwards, but I didn't see him doing anything new this year that he hadn't done before. I didn't see him do anything with Noah Spence, which to me, if I'm Brinson Buckner, I'm saying, well, that's job one. I've got to turn that guy into a player. This team spent a number 2 pick on him, second-round pick. I've got to turn him into an effective player, and it didn't happen. Carl Nassib was a nice pickup. I think again, he just succeeded off a raw skill. I didn't see Brinson Buckner do anything special with this group, and my guess is the Buccaneers see it the same way. Because again, here's a guy who, that is known by the new coach Bruce Arians, and certainly known by Jason Light, and he's not part of the team anymore.
So he doesn't get any love for Vita Vea's improvement or Nassib at all, huh?
No, I don't give him any love for that. Carl Nassib's not a chump. A pretty good football player, drafted pretty high. I think he just found he got comfortable in a spot finally and developed a little bit of confidence off some success, and good for him. Good player, keep him around, but Brinson Buckner, you can do better than that in terms of defensive line coaches.
All right, our last Buck headline before we get to 3 and out. Back to London again. Back to London next season, and it's an NFC South game. They got to give up an NFC South home game to go to London. Is that fair?
Well, it's how the system works, and I had somebody on Twitter tweet me this week. How is it that the Bucs always give up one of these games, a home game, to their to go to London? And I had a simple answer. I said, check out the actual attendance figures for games at RJS, Raymond James Stadium. Your answer is right there. And that's it. You know who's impacted by this? About 20 to 30,000 Bucs fans. That's it. Not a million, not 100,000. The 20 or 30,000 that actually show up at games every week. Those are the ones who are affected by it. And so it's an opportunity for the Bucs to go, and you know what? They'll have 20,000 Bucs fans in London. They've got a great UK club over there, Bucs fan club, run by Paul Stewart. Got a great guy. The 2 times I've been to London, he's been nothing but the most gracious host. Proud to say he's a good friend of mine. And I'm glad he's getting to see his team firsthand without having to cross the pond.
So as many Bucs fans are as upset as the amount of USF fans that attend most games, I guess.
That's about it, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that said, Justin, you know what time it is.
Yes, I do.
Three and out, baby. 3 questions, and we're out of here. And we're going to touch a little bit of everything in this 3 and out. The first rule, though, in 2019, remember, we have to have Justin go first, Roy, to make this a better podcast. Okay? Justin is the leadoff hitter, then Roy, and then I'm merely the third hitter. So first question in our 3 and out, who has a better future with Bucco Bruce Arians in the coming years? GERALD McCOY or Donovan Smith?
Ooh.
Or I guess you could say none of the above if you want to.
Yeah, actually, that's a good answer. I feel like GERALD McCOY is probably on his way out, and Donovan Smith, I don't know if he has much left in him. I'll go with none of the above. Maybe Roy can change my mind. He's good at that.
That was my good. I did a lot of radio this week after the non-call. My God, that was crazy. And I did it was kind of a multiple choice question with the NFL officials. It was, would it be helmet to helmet, A? B, would it be pass interference? Or C, would it be none of the above? And they chose C. So go ahead, Roy.
That's good. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
My turn?
Yes.
Donovan Smith, simply because he has more upside. Bucs spent a second-round pick on him. Again, I'm not going to go as far as to say I'm a Donovan Smith fan, but the Buccaneers are, I believe, and I think they still will be, even after Bruce Arians and his new offensive line coach have looked at the tape. He's a very sturdy player in the Buccaneers scheme. I'll say it again, folks. He is forced to do a lot of things that other left tackles are not. A lot of offensive schemes are designed to get the ball out quickly. The Bucs scheme under Dirk Cutter, and it'll probably be the same under Bruce Arians, is not designed to get the ball out quickly. It's designed to throw it downfield. That requires a left tackle to spend a little bit more time on his block, usually about another second and a half more than most left tackles. So therefore, he's going to be exposed a little bit more. He's going to get beaten a little bit more. And the other thing you got to remember, in a 4 vertical scheme, which is what Dirk Cutter ran, and which very similar to what Bruce Arians runs, everybody's going out. And 4 verticals means you got 4 guys basically running downfield and somebody coming in underneath, and that's your bailout target. In those situations, folks, there's no chip blocker, okay? You're not getting help from a tight end. You're probably not getting a whole lot of help from a running back. It's all on that left tackle. He's out there on an island. I think the Buccaneers realize that. I think it's one of the reasons they're in essence pleased with Donovan Smith, and why Donovan Smith will continue to be one of this team's starting tackles. I won't say left tackle. Could move to the right side, because you go back and look at his draft grades. A lot of people thought he was more suited as a right tackle. If they can find a better option at the left side, they'll move him to the right and stick with him. That's my prediction.
And who would have thought we'd be saying that a year ago? But that's the nature of the NFL. With coaching changes, with everything that happens so fast in this league, you never know. I have to agree with you. I don't think Donovan Smith's the best left tackle in the world. Not even close, maybe. But GERALD McCOY, it just seems like the tea leaves are there that he's not going to come back. I like the picture they had. I think it was on Buccaneers.com of he and Bruce Arians shaking hands at the facility. But it just seems like he's not a part of that future. But we'll see. A lot can happen in the coming months. Okay, we talked about the non-call earlier in the podcast. That's the big story in the NFL right now. But what's the worst call ever in sports? Like the worst ever. I have 3 finalists, and if you don't know these, or if you differ, I guess you could go off the board. But Armando Galarraga was pitching a perfect game, and the umpire blew it in the 9th inning and deprived him of the perfect game. It was a blatant, terrible call. Took a perfect game away from him. The ump knew it right afterwards. That's before they had replay. That was a bad call. I go back to the 83 World Series. Dan Dinkinger made a terrible call at first base that blew the World Series at that time. Then you have the 72 Olympics men's basketball, Russia against the United States, I believe, and that was a bad one as well. Justin, you're younger than Roy and I, so I don't know if any of these hit you at all? You can go off the board if you want, but those are kind of my three finalists.
I do have to go off the board. You're right. I wasn't alive for none of those. I don't follow baseball, so although losing a perfect game does kind of suck.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
By the way, the Dinkinger, the result, Kansas City. It was Kansas City against St. Louis. It was Game 6 of the World Series. Cardinals were ahead 1-0. The Royals' Jorge Orta led off the inning with the slow roller up the line and was clearly out by half a step, but Dinkinger called him safe, and the rest was kind of history.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one. I've seen that before. Boy, and if I was to go off script, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, and I can't.
You got the tuck rule a couple years ago. You got the catch, no catch.
Tuck rule is a good one, yeah. I also think of, it wasn't a big deal, but I remember the replacement refs with the Green Bay Seattle game.
That was bad too.
Although those were replacement refs. So, I'll go with the World Series botch. I guess that seems like a tough break to lose that kind of game on a play like that, and such a big game like that too. So,
what you got, Roy?
Yeah, I'm right there with him. It's Don Denkinger for sure. Look, I don't mind that it cost the St. Louis Cardinals a World Series, but it cost the St. Louis Cardinals a World Series. It cost them a game. Royals went on to win the next one 11-0. It cost the team a world championship. I think the call this past weekend in New Orleans is going to go down right there next to it because it cost the team a chance to go to a championship. It cost them a championship.
It cost me a trip to the Super Bowl, Roy.
Yeah, it cost them a chance to go to the Super Bowl. So it cost them an NFC title, and this is so. I think they're very similar. So I'll go with Denkinger and as my number one, and 1A is the blown call in New Orleans.
I got to say, the World Series is bad, and the Saints game was bad. I think they're both top threes. But the more I read and the more documentaries I see about that 1972 Olympic men's basketball game, and I see how it affects guys like Doug Collins, who hit 2 free throws to put USA up by 1. But then after that, the Soviets got 3 separate attempts at an inbounds pass. On the 3rd attempt, they were able to get free for an easy layup. Time expires. USA doesn't get the gold medal. That's pretty bad. That's unbelievable that they would give them 3 different shots. Now, it's one thing to make a bad call, in the World Series. That's one call, or a pass interference. That's one. But they gave him 3 different tries. So that's kind of mine.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
So, all right. Speaking of baseball, Mariano Rivera, the first member of the Baseball Hall of Fame to be voted in unanimously. Congratulations to him. Congratulations to Roy Halladay. Congratulations to Edgar Martinez and Mike Mussina. I don't really think he's a Hall of Famer, but that's just my opinion. Let me go off the board a little bit, guys. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are 2 interesting guys because they had great careers, but they obviously used steroids, whether they want to admit it or not. Sorry, guys, we kind of know. Do you think either one of those guys, none of the above, or do you pick one to go in the Hall of Fame moving forward in the next couple of years?
Who are the 3 again?
I'm sorry, just Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens.
Okay.
Barry Bonds. I thought I said Bobby. Yeah.
Am I going first?
Yes.
So I never followed baseball much, but when I was younger, I did. I was more into baseball. I collected the cards and all. And I remember growing up, Roger Clemens was one of the big names I was familiar with. Barry Bonds was also great too. But I don't know. I do think them leaving him out is kind of dumb in a way. I mean, like everyone did it. They just happened to get caught, I guess. I don't know. I guess it's either all or none, so I'll go with both of them.
I can't wait to hear. Roy always surprises me. He kind of surprised me earlier in the podcast because I thought you would be harder on the Saints. I thought you would be maybe, I don't think it was that bad. They had their chances. You kind of surprised me there, but I can't wait to hear your answer here.
Neither one belongs in because they're cheaters and they didn't need to cheat.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. First of all, again, they both would have been Hall of Famers had they not cheated. Had they just gone naturally and done what they did, they might not have put up some of the numbers they put up, might not have lasted as long as they did, but they both would have been in the Hall of Fame anyway. That's my opinion. But my opinion is based in part on the fact that where Justin's wrong, with all due respect, Justin, is that not everybody did it. Greg Maddux didn't do it. There's hundreds and hundreds of players who weren't cheating, and those guys, and they were still good enough to make it to the Hall of Fame. I just think that if you cheat, you don't belong you don't belong. That's not how this was done. It's just wrong, and I think they're getting their due, what's due to them in terms of not making it because they cheated, and there was no reason for them to cheat. They were good enough without it. They didn't have to do it, and if they never make it in, I won't feel sorry for them. They cheated the game.
I'm used to getting ganged up on. I'm going to gang up on Justin this time around. Roy and I are going to gang up on you, Justin. Here's my thing with this, okay? I'm agreeing with you, Roy, no doubt about it. But I think there's a tier of steroid use. Like, to me, and you mentioned it, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens would have been Hall of Famers without the performance-enhancing drugs. But Sammy Sosa, Rafael Palmeiro, and Mark McGwire would not have been. Those guys, I think McGwire, his problem was he couldn't stay healthy. He needed them, and that's no excuse. But my whole thing is, not only did Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens use them, but they've lied about it for years. It's almost like Pete Rose. I'm a big Pete Rose fan, but you lied too much, Pete. That's why you'll never get in the Hall of Fame. Lying on top of cheating is bad. It almost goes back to, this is a Bucs podcast. The biggest problem I had with Jameis Winston wasn't that he did the Uber thing 2.5 years ago. It's that he lied about it within the last year. I don't like liars, and I don't like cheaters. And Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens are liars and cheaters.
And you know what? The bottom line here is if you take a vote, and this has been done, if you take a poll of the living Hall of Famers, they will overwhelmingly agree that the cheaters don't belong. That's not how they got there. It's not how anybody should get there. It's not what that mantle is about. That is an honor, and you don't earn it by cheating in that form or fashion. If you're choking up a little bit high in your bat or something, or cheating in some other small way, the way the game is within the rules of the game, that we understand that. But when you start when it's performance enhancing, that's different. And like I said, most of the Hall of Famers alive today believe that it's just not right for those guys to get in. And I'll give you a good argument. Fred McGriff is not in the Hall of Fame either, and he could be, because he's got 500 plus homers or short of it, and he did it clean. That's a clean player, and he's not in, and he should be. And Barry Bonds doesn't belong there because he cheated. How much did he cheat? We'll never know. That's just it. How much of an impact did cheating have? We'll never know, and that's why we can't really quantify it, and why it's not fair to say that, oh, everybody did it, and it was accepted at the time. It shouldn't have been accepted at the time, and the fact that they've changed the rules on it shows that it's not accepted now.
Two more things before we're out of here. Guys like Curt Schilling get hurt because Curt Schilling's just basically he's an outspoken guy, and he irritates a lot of people with his tweets and his political views. But I don't care about any of that. If the guy played between the lines and he was such a historically great post-game player, I don't care what he did. And as long as he didn't hurt anybody, if he has bad judgment, that's on him. I think you shouldn't punish a guy for that. And I think it's ridiculous. I think Mariano Rivera should have been unanimous, but it's ridiculous that he's the first guy ever to be unanimous. You think, Mariano Rivera is the best relief pitcher we've ever seen in baseball, but Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle or Sandy Koufax, those guys shouldn't have been unanimous. I mean, that's what baseball writers have gotten it wrong for a long time. Not all of them, because many of them voted those guys in, their first ballot guys, but it's crazy to me that Mariano Rivera is the first unanimous guy ever.
That is kind of strange, but you know what? It's also one of the reasons why more baseball writers are showing their ballots now. They're showing how they voted, and I think that's a good thing. I think we should see it because, again, look, everybody's got their own opinions on why they have certain guys in, but there are certain players who it's a no-brainer. Anybody can figure it out. They're Hall of Famers, and yes, Mariano Rivera is one of them. But so is Babe Ruth, so is Ty Cobb, so is Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks. Take your pick. There's a lot of guys in there that should have been unanimous, and it just makes you wonder, why weren't they voted for? You'd like to go back and ask that question, but now those questions can be asked.
And see, now, Justin, now you know how it feels when you guys gang up on me.
I did, to my credit, say I don't follow baseball.
You did?
That's how it feels when you got Elton John over Billy Joel. That's how it works. Right, man. That's how it works. All right, well, that wraps up. You know what? Here we are in late January, and we're almost at an hour, so we can fill time. It doesn't matter if it's January, July, or October, baby. Here on A Few Extra Bucks, we get it done. Next week, we'll give you our Super Bowl picks and kind of break down that game and give you any Bucs breaking news, talk about their week at the Senior Bowl, and moving ahead to the Combine, which is right around the corner as well. But for Justin Thomas and Roy Cummings, I'm Mike Neighbors. We love our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. Great brews, great food, great service. Subscribe, please, to pewterpirates.com. We've had our best 2 weeks ever with our video updates on Bruce Arians and our podcast recently, so we appreciate that. We're going to be with you, Bucs fans, throughout the year. So subscribe to pewterpirates.com and keep listening to our podcast. We appreciate it very much, and we'll talk to you again next week.